Independence. We're talking about braking independence here. This variable asks how the suspension performs under braking input. Many suspension designs lock out under braking forces, usually when you're headed downhill or into a rough section of trail, precisely the time when you need full suspension activity. Next time you're testing a bike, slam on the rear brakes and ask yourself if the rear suspension remains fully active and, likewise, doesn't compress or extend, causing unexpected geometry variations. Giant tests for independence in the following manner. Again, using the same data acquisition equipped complete bicycles, Giant engineers test independence by coasting up to a speed of 15 miles an hour down the 12% grade under a weight of a 140-pound rider. Again, the shock is set up for the weight of a 140-pound rider with 20% sag and minimal compression damping. The rear brake only is applied to slow the bike to a complete stop as quickly as possible without skidding. The same linear positional gauge measures the amount of shock compression that occurs under this heavy braking. More shock compression under braking equals poorer performance. Now it's time for the head-to-head comparison portion of the suspension report card. The suspension designs tested in the suspension report card are single pivot, VPP, 4-bar, R1I, Maestro. Let's begin with a look at VPP design as found on the Santa Cruz Blur LT. Activity. Just a B-. Activity is reasonable. Efficiency. A solid A+ here. It does pedal extremely well. Independence. Achieves only a C grade here because VPP designs sacrifice braking independence for efficiency. 4-bar linkage, as found on the specialized stump jumper FSR. Activity. It gets an A-. From stutters to big hits, 4-bar excels in bump compliance. Efficiency. It gets only a D. With its near vertical wheel path, FSR bobs under pedaling motion and relies heavily upon its brain shock to compensate for its inefficiency. Independence. A poor C- grade. This type of suspension is acceptable, but not great at separating braking forces from suspension activity. Single pivot, as found on Cannondale's Rush. Activity. It gets a C-. Absolutely reliant on shock technology, single pivot designs are characteristically one-dimensional, meaning they can be tuned to function well in one characteristic, but not to balance all three. Efficiency. Barely passing here with a C. Again, highly reliant on shock technology and completely dependent on pivot placement, single pivot bikes can exhibit the greatest levels of pedaling feedback, depending on which chainring the rider is in. Independence. An interesting result of A+. This single pivot design can be tuned to win only one of these three critical suspension characteristics. Extremely heavy stock shock damping is added to the Rush's rear shock to make it not compress under braking, but making it perform poorly in the activity and efficiency categories. The R1I design, as found on Trek's Fuel EX. Activity. Not bad. Gets a B-. Bump compliance is reasonable. Efficiency. Again, not bad. Gets a straight A here. Pedals well with only minimal pedaling feedback in certain gear selections. Independence. A straight B. Because the rear pivot is centered around the rear axle, the R1I design functions much better than its earlier Trek predecessors, but still doesn't surpass the total independence of a dual-link design. Finally, there's Maestro, as found on Giant's Trans X. Activity. It gets an A+. From rapid-fire stutters to heavy G-out compression type hits, this type of suspension performs extremely well over most types of terrain. Efficiency. An A here. Almost zero shock compression can be felt when in all three front chainring combinations. Independence. A solid B here. It's almost impossible to achieve straight A's in every category, and MAESTRO sacrifices only a tiny amount of braking independence for outstanding activity and efficiency, a worthy engineering feat. So these are the grades of the suspension report card. While some suspension systems may rate higher in one particular category, it's important to note that only MAESTRO scores the highest overall grade. If we all rode mountain bikes over the identical type of terrain, a one-dimensional design might work. But because we ride up, down, and over an endless variety of routes, rocks, and dirt, we all demand a mountain bike design that works in all conditions. Perfectly balanced MAESTRO-equipped bicycles, such as the Anthem X Advanced SL, Trance X Advanced SL, Rain X, Faith, and Glory, provide just the right amount of activity, efficiency, and independence that off-road riders crave. Hopefully, in watching this presentation, you've learned a lot about MAESTRO suspension technology. Specifically, you've learned about the 4-2-1 concept and how it affects activity, efficiency, and independence. Beyond that, we also invite you to get out on a test ride on one of our bikes, because there's no better way to see if suspension works than on your own trails and under your specific conditions. Based on that test ride, and based on what you've learned today, we hope you agree that MAESTRO suspension technology is simply the best in the world.